Saddle up, truth seekers, and prepare to have your boots knocked off. Welcome back to our channel, where we unravel the wild, gritty tales of the Old West, those legendary stories of outlaws, cowboys, and pioneers that have fueled our imaginations for generations. But hold your horses. What if the tales you've cherished, the ones that feel as real as a desert sunset, are nothing but smoke and mirrors? Today we're riding hard to bust 21 Wild West myths you might still believe, separating fact from the Hollywood fairy tales. We've dug deep to separate the history from the Hollywood. If you're ready to uncover the real stories behind the legends, do us a favor and hit that like button. Subscribe to the channel so you don't miss out and ring that notification bell. All right, let's get to debunking. Lie number 1. Billy the Kid was a mastermind of bank and train robberies. The myth paints Billy the Kid as a cunning outlaw, a specialist in hitting banks and trains. The reality is, Henry McCarty, or William H. Bonney, was mainly a cattle rustler and a gunfighter caught up in New Mexico's Lincoln County War. Historical records show he never actually robbed a bank or a train. His fame came from his skill with a gun and his role in that bloody conflict, not from masterminding big heists. Lie number 2. Bank heists were as common as sundown. Think of classic westerns, and you see masked bandits on horseback frequently robbing the local bank. The truth is, bank robberies were surprisingly rare in the Old West. We're talking maybe 8 to 14 documented across the entire frontier over about 40 years. Banks were usually well placed in towns, often near the sheriff, and had decent security for the time, making them tough targets compared to stagecoaches or trains in remote areas. Lie number 3, cowboy slang like howdy partner and yeehaw was the universal language of the range. We imagine cowboys constantly saying howdy partner or yelling yeehaw. While cowboy lingo was colorful, much of what we hear in movies is a mix of some authentic terms, regional speech, and a lot of Hollywood invention. Howdy was a real greeting, but howdy partner became a stereotype. Exclamations like yeehaw and commands like reach for the sky were largely popularized by fiction for dramatic effect. Lie number 4. Cowboy trail food was exclusively monotonous beans and beef. The picture of a cowboy eating nothing but beans and stringy beef day after day is a common one. While beef and beans were staples, the chuck wagon, invented by Charles Goodnight, carried a more varied pantry: flour, salt pork, coffee, dried fruit, potatoes, and onions allowed for sourdough biscuits, stews, and even fruit pies. Trail cooks were resourceful and supplemented with hunted game. Lie number 5. Annie Oakley's fame was solely based on performance with no wider impact. Annie Oakley is known as a phenomenal trick shooter in Buffalo Bill's Wild West show, but the myth says her influence stopped at the arena edge. The reality is Phoebe Ann Moses, Little Sure Shot, was a modest star who championed women's empowerment. She encouraged women to learn firearm use for self-protection, a radical idea then, and even offered to raise a regiment of women volunteers for World War I. Lie number 6. All saloon whiskey was undrinkable rot gut. Movie saloons always show cowboys drinking stuff that looks like it could strip paint. While a lot of frontier alcohol was poor quality, sometimes dangerously adulterated with things like tobacco or even strychnine, not all of it was terrible. Many saloon owners prided themselves on offering better quality spirits to attract a more discerning crowd. And for a non-alcoholic choice, sarsaparilla was quite popular. Lie number 7. Horse theft was always a hanging offense. The legend says stealing a horse in the Wild West was an automatic death sentence by hanging, while horse theft was a very serious crime because a horse was vital for survival and livelihood, and hanging was a frequent outcome, especially by vigilantes. It wasn't the only punishment. State laws also prescribed jail time, public lashings, or even branding the thief's forehead with the letters HT. Lie number 8. Homesteading free land was a gift, not a grind. The Homestead Act of 1862 is often seen as a golden ticket to free, fertile land. The reality was that this free land came at a huge cost of backbreaking labor, immense hardship, and frequent failure. Homesteaders had to live on the land for 5 years, build a home, and make improvements, often facing harsh weather, difficult soil, insect plagues, and crippling debt. Success rates were far from 100%. Lie number 9, pianos in saloons, were a Hollywood invention for atmosphere. That tinkling piano is a staple of movie saloons, but many assumed transporting such an instrument to a rough frontier town was too impractical. Surprisingly, pianos were quite common in many Old West saloons. Archaeological digs have found piano parts. Saloon owners invested in them as an attraction, and patrons with musical skills often played, providing entertainment for everyone. Lie number 10, Buffalo Bill Cody's stint as a Pony Express rider is undisputed fact. Part of Buffalo Bill's heroic image is his daring service as a young Pony Express rider. However, historians find this claim dubious and likely an exaggeration for his Wild West show. Evidence suggests that during the Pony Express's brief run, young William Cody was probably attending school. He did carry messages for the firm that later started the Pony Express, but that's different from being an official rider. Lie number 11, bathing, was a once-a-year event for pioneers. The grimy, unwashed cowboy is a persistent image, leading many to believe bathing was an annual luxury, if that. Hygiene was certainly challenging due to limited clean water and pervasive dust. But the idea of pioneers being universally filthy is an overstatement. People cleaned up when they could, especially when they reached a town. It varied greatly based on circumstances. Lie number 12, cattle rustlers were universally and immediately lynched without trial. If caught with a stolen cow, the myth dictates an immediate hanging by vigilantes. While cattle rustling was a serious offense and vigilante justice did occur, especially where formal law was weak, it wasn't the only response. As the West became more settled, stock raisers associations formed to combat theft, hiring their own detectives. Formal legal processes with courts and jails also developed, though their effectiveness varied. Lie number 13. Every frontier toothache ended with a blacksmith and pliers without anesthesia. Got a toothache in the Old West? The myth says your only option was the blacksmith or barber with pliers and no pain relief. Dental health was poor, and extractions were common, sometimes done by non-specialists. Alcohol was the main painkiller. However, some early anesthetics like opium or cocaine did make their way west, and actual trained dentists, though few, like Doc Holliday, did practice on the frontier. Lie number 14. All Native American plains. Tribes lived identical nomadic lifestyles, focused solely on buffalo. The Plains Indian is often shown as a single culture: nomadic, teepee-dwelling, buffalo hunting. The reality was vastly different lifestyles. North America had over 200 tribes speaking different languages, while horses led many plains tribes like the Lakota and Cheyenne to a nomadic bison hunting lifestyle. Many other plains groups were semi-settled farmers. Lifestyles, housing, and governance varied hugely across all Native American nations. Lie number 15. Commonly used, Wild West remedies for snake bites were effective. Frontier folks supposedly had a trove of tried-and-true remedies for common ailments, including snake bites. The truth is, many of these cures were ineffective or downright harmful. Treatments for snake bites included applying raw beef, a mix of vinegar and gunpowder, or cauterizing the wound. Standard medical practices of the era, like bleeding and purging with substances like mercury-laden calomel, often did more harm than good. Lie number 16. Children on the frontier had no time for games or education. Pioneer children are often depicted as tiny adults, their lives nothing but relentless, grim chores. While children did have significant responsibilities from a young age, their lives weren't devoid of play or education. One-room schoolhouses were common, though attendance could be sporadic. For play, children used their imaginations, making dolls from corn husks or rags, and playing outdoor games like hide-and-seek. Lie number 17. All frontier. Medical practitioners were untrained frauds. If you got sick on the frontier, the myth suggests your only options were snake oil salesmen or clueless quacks. The reality was a mixed bag. In the mid-1800s, the medical profession was still developing, and licensing was inconsistent. Some doctors were self-appointed. However, there were also individuals with degrees from medical schools, and many learned through apprenticeships. The quality of care varied wildly, but not everyone was an outright fraud. Lie number 18. Relations between Native Americans and settlers were exclusively violent. The West is often portrayed as a perpetual battleground between cowboys and Indians, with interactions defined solely by violence. While conflict was a tragic and undeniable part, relations were much more complex. There were significant periods of trade, like the fur trade, formal treaties, though often broken by the government, shifting alliances, and instances of uneasy coexistence. The narrative of constant warfare is an oversimplification. Lie number 19. The great outdoors and hard labor. Insured pioneers were exceptionally healthy life on the frontier, with its fresh air and physical exertion, supposedly made pioneers incredibly robust and immune to disease. In reality, the frontier was a breeding ground for illness. The journey west involved unsanitary conditions, limited diets, and harsh weather, making illness the #1 killer. Diseases like cholera, smallpox, and tuberculosis ravaged both settler and Native American populations. Life was incredibly hard, not inherently healthy. Lie number 20, one-room schoolhouse. Teachers were typically illiterate drifters. The image of a frontier teacher is often an uneducated drifter, barely literate themselves. In fact, while qualifications weren't as stringent as today, many frontier teachers were dedicated individuals, often young women who had completed an 8th grade education themselves. For women, teaching offered a respectable employment opportunity. These teachers played a crucial role in bringing basic literacy and numeracy to new settlements. Lie number 21. The American West was a pristine, unchanged environment before European settlers arrived. The myth paints the pre-settler West as an untouched wilderness where Native Americans left no trace. The reality is Native peoples actively managed and profoundly shaped their environments for millennia through sophisticated agriculture, controlled burning to encourage specific plants or aid hunting, and building villages and trail networks. While often sustainable, their impact was significant. The settlers' impact was different, mainly in its unprecedented scale and rapidity. Well, that's a lot of myths busted. It just goes to show that the real Wild West was far more complex, challenging, and diverse than the stories we've often been told. From daily life and daring deeds to the very people who shaped the era, the truth is always more fascinating than fiction. What Wild West fact were you most surprised to learn was actually a lie? Or is there another myth you'd like us to tackle? Let us know down in the comments. And if you enjoyed this trip through history, please hit that like button, share it with a fellow history enthusiast, and make sure you're subscribed with that notification bell clicked so you don't miss our next adventure. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you on the trail.